The most common mistake nowadays, right? You're on mute. Sorry. Good afternoon.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. And thanks for taking the time to join us for this chat series about diversity and inclusion and the developments that are happening in the space in India. Today's conversation is on the role of parents and corporates in autism employment programs in India. Rangam and Sourceable have kicked off a weekly series of talks and events on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook that will highlight the need for greater understanding and representation of people with autism, neurodivergence, and other disabilities in the workplace. We wish you all would join and encourage others to join these events and give a voice to a segment of our society that is underrepresented in the workforce and has tremendous potential. Having said this, let us start the conversation. I am Chandramouli Dhara, Director of Social and Digital Marketing at Rangam, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's guest. Our guest is Gopika Kapoor. She is not a stranger to the disability, diversity, and inclusion space in India. She is an accomplished published author, an autism parent, a corporate trainer, and a D&I consultant. Having wearing so many hats, I don't think I'll be able to do justice to introduce her. So I'd like Gopika to introduce herself a little bit.
Thank you very, very much, Prabhaji. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to see all of Rangam's work in India. So, as you said, I am a parent. I'm an autism parent. I have a 16-year-old son who is on the autism spectrum. And my journey with him started 13 years ago when he was diagnosed with autism. After I kind of picked up the pieces of my world, which had shattered completely with his diagnosis, I realized that I am in a position of extreme privilege when it comes to being able to have access to the best treatment for him, when it comes to having the financial ability to be able to pay for that treatment and the therapy. And so, in an effort to give back, I joined an NGO called Umid Child Development Center, where my son is originally diagnosed. And it was at this NGO that I spent 10 years. I started out as a junior therapist, working with children, gradually building my caseload. And in the 10 years that I worked there, I must have worked with over 400 to 500 families, children and their families, each of whom taught me so much about autism. At the same time, I also did a lot of training on different aspects of autism and eventually worked on a WHO campaign, a project called the Caregiver Skills Training Program, where we ran the pilot and the pre-pilot out of 3 sites in Mumbai. So that is a little bit about me. I left Umid in 2020 to write Beyond the Blue. Beyond the Blue is India's first book by a parent on autism. And I have used in that my personal journey and my professional knowledge that I have acquired over the years to really talk about my journey as well as what parents can do to help their children who are on the autism spectrum. And now my journey is taking a new path, the path of diversity and inclusion, training for corporates when they hire people on the autism spectrum. So this is a new aspect, and I'm very, very eager to get on this road and explore this. So very excited to do that. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So being a parent, I think today's topic actually sits right in your clubhouse about what is the role that parents and corporates play in autism employment programs. So
right.
Let us get there. I mean, India as a culture has a very different way of the interaction and the relationships that parents and children have is a little different. How do you really think that parents seem to underestimate the potential of their children who are with autism or are neurodiverse or have neurodivergence? Do you think they underestimate their potentials and try to soften the blows a little bit more than?
I think that in India, there is in any case a tendency to look at our children, whether they are on the spectrum or whether they are neurotypical, as babies. This extends to helping out the child. You will very often see even a neurotypical child who is 8 or 10 or sometimes even 12 who is being bathed by the mother or by the household help. When this is something which children in the Western world, because there is no help as such, these functions are performed by children much, much earlier. Uh, so in any case, there is a tendency to kind of baby or infantilize a lot of children. Add to that the fact that this child is a neurodiverse child. As this child grows, while parents are extremely protective of this child, they often becomes what is known as a prison of protection. By this, I mean that when they are so protective, the parents, that in their protection of the child, it almost becomes like a prison. So the child, or in many cases, the young adult is not allowed or given that space to explore the world around them, to explore themselves, their feelings, their emotions, and their interests, and what their potential and what they can do in life. So yes, I would say that in a lot of cases, because there is this whole prison of protection, because parents want to cosset their children, protect them, keep them safe, that in the fear of not letting them go and letting them go out into the world and explore things, they very often underestimate their potential and don't let them live up to their potential. I heard a very beautiful phrase which is called the dignity of risk and failure. So, very often, what parents do is they do not allow their children this dignity of risk and failure, because their fear is that if I let my child go out into the workspace or go to an educational institute, there will be people who will make fun of them, they may ridicule them, they may bully them, they may do all those things. Yes, they may, but they may also be able to explore other things and learn lessons. But because of this not giving them this dignity of risk and not letting them take those risks, it very often happens that their potential is not fulfilled or explored, and is really underestimated. And that is also, I think, probably could be one of the causes why the employability rate of individuals with autism, even though some of them may be of average or above average intelligence, is not as much as it should be.
I really, and I mean, I really like the phrase, the dignity of failure and risk, which is true. As everybody tells you that failure is the stepping stone of success. If you don't fail, I don't know anybody or you with so much experience and so many varied thoughts. You also would not know many people who have not failed at anything before they succeeded.
Exactly.
Everybody has to fail, and that is the thing. So, having touched upon that, do you really think that parents have to set boundaries of how much they need to be involved with their children, and need to set some certain timetables? Like, there is no need to call them every day at any time of the day and say, how are you doing? Instead, there is an appointed hour. I'm not saying a timetable per se, but actually set a schedule, or give the children their structured thought process where they will know, I'll anticipate a call in the next couple of hours. My mom or my dad or my support provider will be calling me for talking to me about my well-being. So they will be able to schedule their days around it. Do you really think that parents need to also set such boundaries when they get involved in their sub-adult or adult children with autism?
Um, I think boundaries have to be definitely set, but I think here what I'd like to talk about is support. So I think what happens is, as a neurotypical child grows, of course, when the child is younger, there is a certain amount of support given. The parent will take the child, to school, or will then teach them certain skills. But as the child starts growing, they're in the 10th grade, then they move to college, they move to higher education, and then they get a job. As you can see in the world around us, with neurotypical children, the support slowly starts fading. And then over time, we've seen a reversal where the children support the parents. Now, when you have neurodiverse individuals, what tends to happen is that the support is may change in character. It may change in the kind of support that is given, but the support is still needed. What is also happening is that the parents are aging themselves, right? So they also, in their ability to give that support, may also be changing. They may be physically, they may be having health problems, they may just be tired and burnt out. And so their ability and willingness to give that support might also be changing. However, the individual on the spectrum does not change the support required. It's not that one day they need the support and the next day they're totally independent. They might need less support, but they will still need that support. And so I would really think that when parents have those kind of boundaries, I think it helps to start building the boundaries, but not suddenly erect them. So, for example, um, and again, I think the they need to strive for a middle ground as far as the boundaries are concerned. So it is not that the parent has to call the child at the workplace every hour on the hour like the BBC. At the same time, it would not be that now you're in the workplace, you're on your own, deal with it by yourself. I think there has to be a middle ground, which is why I thought that this topic was so interesting, because as young people, as individuals with autism enter the workplace, when there is a kind of meeting of the organization, the person on the spectrum who is employed, and the parents, and there is a kind of confluence of all three, and there is some sort of synchronicity between the three, it can really create a wonderful and very efficient and productive work setting for the organization as well as the individual on the spectrum. So here I'm talking about parents giving support as well as the organization giving support together at the same time, both being very clear, as well as the individual on the spectrum being very clear of what the boundaries are, that and not letting those get bridged in between.
So that's true. I mean, striking a perfect balance, that's what everything comes down to. I mean, the employers or the corporates, the parents, as well as the individual on autism who is actually working there as an employee, they have to strike this perfect balance where, there is a structure, there is support, there is everything is available, and the level of independence actually grows instead of being dependent on somebody.
Right.
So, what are some of so since we spoke about the parents part a little bit, let us see what is there anything the employers can do to strike this balance? Is there any step? Are there any steps the employers can take to make sure that they are also contributing to creating this perfect balance?
So I think, unlike, I guess, their neurotypical employees who would get hired and would probably be able to manage things by themselves, here I think employers first need to get comfortable with the idea that, look, along with hiring this one person, we will have to have some contact with their family as well. And I think with work from home and things, the lines between work and home getting blurred, I think people are becoming a little more open to that as well, because they are realizing that work life and home life are intersecting at a lot of levels. So I think that when it comes to employers, involving the family at different stages is important. In the first place, I think during the interview stage, if there is an employee who is being interviewed by the company, it would help if the employers reached out to the parents and said, you can be present when the person is being interviewed, whether this is in person as things open up, or maybe on Zoom or any other platform where it's happening online, just so that when the potential candidate is being interviewed, they can also be around just to ease anxiety, to help the employer, the organization who's hiring them, understand in case the person is not able to express themselves adequately, because we do know that a lot of people with autism, when they get high anxiety, their ability to express goes down. So that was starting with that. Again, once the individual is employed within the organization, having a sort of touch base with the parent, as well as maybe the buddy or the hiring manager or the mentor, whoever is assigned to that individual, would be a good idea. So, for example, if the person is working from home and has had a lot of struggle in terms of their mental health, has had a very bad weekend, for example, where something has happened to set off a lot of mental health challenges. The parent can just be in touch with the buddy or the mentor or the hiring manager, whoever it is at the workplace, and say, my son, daughter had a difficult weekend. It has really impacted their mental health, and so they might not be able to perform to that level that you expect of them on Monday. So just want you to be aware of this. On their end, the person at work would then be able to maybe modify the weekly tasks, where if there are 10 tasks intended for the week, on Monday the person only has to do 2 instead of the usual 5, for example, and then cover the balance at a time when they are mentally feeling much better. Again, having parents to come in and talk with other employees would be a great idea, where they can talk to other employees about what it's like to have a child on the spectrum, or talk to their manager and say, this is what really works with this person, if you give them that structure. So as somebody who knows autism, I would be able to sit with you if you were a potential employer and say, you know what, maybe you should change your lighting, you can have a cubicle with partitions, but I will not know exactly what works with that particular employee and that person with autism. Because as the saying goes, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Everybody on the autism spectrum is different, with different strengths and different challenges, just like we all are. The only difference is, I think we're able to express what we want in a more kind of coherent way. Whereas individuals on the autism spectrum, when they experience anxiety, their ability, like I said, to express, their ability to communicate is impacted. And so maybe just having a little interaction where the parent comes in and says, this is what is going to make this person really work well, would help the employer also understand what works. I'm kind of comparing it a little bit to when my son was younger, and before he would start the school year, I would go to the teacher with a list saying, please give him one-step instructions, speak slowly, one instruction at a time, that kind of thing. It's sort of the same thing, but it is just done in a different scenario. The whole thing is that individuals on the autism spectrum, the challenges may remain the same. They may change in nature slightly, but essentially the challenges may stay the same.
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. Communication, having clear steps, and having all the support structures would create that perfect balance between employer and parent as well as the employee. Uh, Now, with so many corporates coming out with diversity and inclusion practices and policies and trying to, do more, do you see a changed attitude even in India? Since we are talking about India, do you see a change in the attitudes for inclusion of people with neurodivergence and autism and other disabilities too? Do you see that there has been a changed attitude? How we are are we becoming more inclusive, or is there still resistance? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think I would talk about the last maybe 13 years since I entered this space after my son's diagnosis. 13 years ago, no, very few people had heard the term autism. Neurodivergence didn't even exist as a term. Developmental disabilities was again something which people didn't talk about. In the last 5 years or so, I can see a lot of change. Especially, I think last 2 years, especially, there has been a lot of explosion in terms of diversity, inclusion. The whole concept of mental health, I would say about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, didn't even exist. And if there is one thing that this whole pandemic has done, it is to bring to the fore, uh, you know, uh, the concept of mental health and the fact that people need help and support with mental health. So that is, I think, possibly one of the few silver linings of this whole pandemic, that people are now sitting up and taking cognizance of the fact that mental health is real and that people need support for this. In terms of diversity and inclusion hiring, I think what is happening is that it has become a sort of buzzword globally. People are across the world, people are hiring more and more individuals with autism, people who are neurodivergent, not because they want to pity this person or they say, okay, oh, here is somebody who's got autism, we should do our duty to, by them, we should fulfill our obligations to society and do our little bit of CSR. Let's take them and put them in, in some sort of menial job and give them 5,000 rupees a month. That is not what is happening. Companies worldwide are recognizing that hiring people with autism makes economic sense. It helps them to save money, it helps them to save time. Individuals with autism are persistent, they're very focused, they're very loyal. They don't move companies just because they don't like change and transition. They would stay with a company for a particular period of time if they are given the right kind of support. So this is what is happening globally. Now, what is happening in India, I think, is that a lot of these global companies who are hiring uh, individuals with autism globally and have autism at work programs globally are coming into India and saying, we need to do this here as well. And so I can see steps being taken in this direction. They're still slow, it's still happening, not on a very large scale, but I think it is picking up. And I hope that this is the signs of a global trend in terms of hiring neurodivergent individuals, because I think that this is really the way the workforce needs to go. This is a huge market of individuals who have untapped potential, and they are all there, they're all willing to be hired, and I think it would be really wonderful. I should add that what I have been reading and what I'm seeing is a lot of companies not just hiring engineers, IT people, accountants, but also looking across the board and hiring people maybe at managerial positions, in IT positions, in positions of accountancy, but also looking at their housekeeping staff, looking at their cafeteria staff, and hiring individuals with autism there. So a lot of companies are really taking this on and making a commitment to change the culture. And that is something which is very, very heartening, and I feel optimistic about that.
Yeah, I mean, not many things are positive about the pandemic, but this definitely looks like one, because I also have started feeling, because I have been working with autism employment and with Rangam for almost 8 years now. I see that the concept of sympathy is going down and empathy is coming, where, I mean, that is what everybody wants, that is what everybody preaches, like, empathy is important, sympathy is like a temporary thing, it comes and goes. Empathy is something that is important, and it ties into all this. Having said that, I mean, this is such a huge topic and this is such a vast thing that we cannot just, like, come and talk for half an hour and say we solved the problem. No, this is it's not a problem, but we solved something. This is not something that can be solved in one shot, one conversation, but we need to keep having these conversations, and I feel that there are going to be further conversations along the way which we will need to do. So
Absolutely.
Yes. Keep the conversation forward. Since we are coming close to the time, we want to stop because of giving respect to everybody's time. What I was wondering was if you have like a personal anecdote you can share that shows how different people or individuals with autism think, how their brains work, how they analyze a problem. Do you have anything like personal experience you can share? That would be like, that would be us trying to end this conversation on a high note, and then we'll come back and we'll revisit this conversation sometime again to take it further in.
Sure. Actually, I'd like to share something that happened about a couple of weeks ago. My bathroom, the geyser in my son's bathroom had there's a pipe which was dripping with water, and I suggested that he put a bucket under it, typical Indian solution, let it drip into the bucket. And then I didn't want a plumber to come in because COVID cases have been increasing. I didn't want to expose my family to an external person. And so I told him, I said, just put a bucket over there. Now that drip, drip, drip of the water that was happening, which is very similar to the Chinese torture that they used to have where water is constantly dripping, was something that he couldn't tolerate because it's too much sensory input for him. It was uncomfortable for him. He couldn't tolerate it. So he said, we have to do something. He was getting anxious. And so I said, okay, let's think about what we can do. And so he came up with his solution where he took a plastic bottle and he poked holes in it with his compass. He tied a kite string, a manja, and he tied it into it. And then he got the ladder and he went up and he tied it on that, over the dripping hole. I would not have thought of that solution. I would have thought of putting the bucket over there and just letting it drip. I would not have gone to the source and said, okay, let's stem this from the source until we can find a plumber. Of course, the ideal thing would have been to find a plumber to kind of, solve this. But until then, I would not have gone and put something up there. And I really was amazed because I thought, oh, this was something which I did not think about at all. And I really think that as the world is becoming more and more polarized, unidimensional, where thinking is happening in one direction, while at the same time we are all so different. We come from different cultures, we come from different experiences, our perceptions of life are different. And as organizations grow, they need to cater to all these different people, customers, opinions, perspectives. When you employ one kind of person, when you employ somebody who only speaks your language and somebody who only talks your talk, you're not going to find solutions to all these varied opinions, varied perspectives. Individuals with autism think so differently, so out of the box, that sometimes they will surprise you with the most out there solution. If you ask me for a solution to a problem or a situation, I will tell you, okay, we can do ABC. An individual with autism will tell you a solution from another language. It's not something which is completely different. And I think that for individuals, for organizations to really invest in people who are different from them is so important, because it will give a completely different perspective and only then can they evolve in it.
Yeah, very true. I mean, as you said, diversity is key. Diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, diversity of practices, diversity of people. Diversity is what brings uniqueness to a product, to a company, to anything you say. I mean, look at our country. So many different languages, so many different dialects, but we identify ourselves as Indian. That is what makes us unique and stand out. And as I said earlier, I feel that these are conversations that we need to keep having, and we would love to have you back once again as our guest, because I feel that there is far more things that we need to talk about than just like touching and going. So having said that, I'd like to thank you for coming on this little chat with me and our little chat show about diversity and inclusion. I would like to thank everybody who has been listening in to us, and there are a lot of people who are leaving comments on LinkedIn. I can read them, but I'm sorry I am not able to address them right now, because they are very varied and there are a lot more things that are being said, and all of them are valid and all of them are important. What we'll do next time when Gopika is back is we'll collate all these questions and all these thoughts that have been put together on the LinkedIn chat. We'll also address them too. And having said that, I would like to thank everybody once again for joining us. And we are here every Thursday at 3 p.m. We always will be talking about diversity, inclusion, and disability inclusion in the workplace, and how we can be able to add support and value to that process. Thank you so much, Gopika. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a lovely conversation, and I really, really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to many, many more conversations, because like you said, we need to keep talking about these things.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. You all have a nice day. A nice weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.